David, on the road at the moment, you've got a band from where? Where have you taken these musicians from?
The core of the band, the rhythm section's pretty much from New York.
Yeah.
I think only two of us have lived there for a long time, but they all live there now. And it's drums, bass, percussion, and myself, and that's the kind of core rhythm section. So there's very little in the way of guitars and keyboards. And then there's 6 string players from Austin, Texas, 3 violins, viola, and 2 cellos. And most of them are from a group called Tosca Tango Orchestra, which, they started a couple of years ago playing tangos in music clubs, as opposed to concert halls or little things like that. They'd go into bars and pubs and do it amplified and encourage people to dance. And of course, nobody knew how to dance, but people started taking lessons, and it became this thing where one night a week they'd play at this bar, the Continental, and people would come out and tango and drink. And I think they recently did the soundtrack to this film, Waking Life, the film was good and their soundtrack's really good as well.
Yeah. Okay, now, over the last, just let's say the 1990s.
Do you want shorter answers?
No. Okay. The 1990s. The musical journey that you've taken hasn't been one that was in the same kind of headline as the 80s with Talking Heads. Is that a better thing, to be under the radar?
Oh, not necessarily. It's always nice when you feel like a lot of people are listening or paying attention. There's certain, in some ways it's nice to be popular. In other ways, it's nice kind of where I am, somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
The middle's not very crowded these days. The bottom's crowded and the top is there's a lot of elbowing for room because it's a smaller space. But in the middle, there's this huge gap. There's not very many people there. And so there's a bit of room to move where I am, which is really nice. It gives me, I have more freedom, I think, than the people who are barely scraping by or just starting, and certainly more freedom than the people who are really successful, who are under tremendous pressure these days to duplicate that success.
Yeah, do you think, the way the record companies work these days, that, if you don't get it by the 2nd album or so, you're gone, whereas if you hadn't got it by about the 4th album, you would have still been there, even though you did?
Yeah, our climb was kind of more gradual, and that was a little more tolerated when we were around. And now it's either got to be, you make it or break it by the 2nd album, or you're back to the bars for you. And which is, think of all the good things we'd be missing if that was the case as far as whatever, films, books, music, whatever. If everything had to achieve mass success by the 2nd go round, there'd be a lot of things that would never have happened.
Yeah, if everything was judged by the dollar. I mean, if you're in the middle, as you say, I mean, in some ways, you were catapulted straight back up to the very top again in terms of, new millennium, top-selling #1 single, Express 2, David Byrne. How's it feel? Is it nice again?
Oh yeah, it's great.
Is it?
Yeah, it's really nice. It's really nice. It's maybe nicer because it wasn't tried for. It was done just for fun, purely from my point of view, the success was purely an accident. Although I'm sure that there were people kind of working the clubs and doing what they did to help it along, but it was never one of those engineered things of, this is what I should do to get back on top again.
Right, so obvious question, how did it come about? I mean, who's Express 2?
Some of them used to be a group called the Ballistic Brothers. And in that form, I'd got in touch with them a few years ago. And I got in touch with them and said, hey, do you want to do something live sometime? You guys ever do anything live? We do something together. And they said, no, we don't. We're DJs, we don't do that. And I said, you sure? I mean, you program the stuff when you're making your records, when you're doing your mixes. But they said no. But then some months ago, they contacted me and said, hey, we've got this track. Do you want to write some words? And a tune and sing on top of our track. And I said, oh, I'll have a go at it. And when I heard it, I thought, oh, I hear what they're after. I immediately heard the kind of vibe they were after. And I thought it would be funny to write a song called Lazy and both try and make laziness sound sexy. And I also loved the idea that the idea of people energetically bouncing up and down in dance clubs to a song called Lazy.
Times a day. I'm lazy when I'm speaking, I'm lazy when I walk, I'm lazy when I'm dancing, and I'm lazy when I talk. I open up my mouth, air comes rushing out, nothing doing, nada, never. How you like me now? Wouldn't it be mad? Wouldn't it be fine? Lazy, lucky lady, dancing, loving all the time. Oh, wicked and I'm lazy.
So does it give you a hunger again to say, hey, either do more with this crowd or to do something else that says to you, I want to get to the top of the charts? Or is it just still the musical journey post Talking Heads of the last 14 years where I think the big sign over your doorway is rhythm, the search for rhythm?
There's no reason why I shouldn't do more things with some various dance acts, since I've been sort of, as you said, a lot of my stuff has been groove oriented for my whole career. So those connections are kind of obvious, and that'll probably happen again. But who knows what it'll be? I can't. Again, if I sort of try for it too hard, it'll probably fail. But if I just do it because it feels right, it might work.
So the who knows what it's going to be approach, I mean, if you're talking 25 years of a musical journey that's more interesting than most people's, I presume you've been happy for most of it. Some things have gone a bit askew maybe, but everything is mostly pretty good.
Yeah, I don't think everything I did is great, but I think the opportunities I've had and the trajectory has been really interesting. Sometimes I've gone way to the edge of what's acceptable, acceptable within what I do, and then kind of veered around, avoiding the middle a bit.
And you pick up bits and pieces all over the place. You learn from everybody. The Balanescu crowd, like in the late 1980s, what did they teach you? What did it teach you working with them?
Working with the string players. I learned that that you could have the groove, and you could have that sort of rich, sensuous, slightly kind of romantic sound that strings do have, and you can mix it with a groove, and it works. And I thought, oh, that's a nice mixture. To me, that's what I feel like when I'm walking down the street.
That's good enough. And so, like, if you think of all the music, one of the last times I spoke to you, you mentioned that you were listening to standards and classics. You were listening to Rodgers and Hart. You were listening to maybe the Willie Nelson did a good shot at that kind of thing, or like you had last night at the end of the gig, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" Some of that kind of, as we know it, in some ways, was playing at the very end of the gig. Is that sort of something that you would have known when you were a kid, or did you come across all that kind of music later on in life? It's not as though your parents were playing it at home, were they?
Not really. Oh, they probably had a couple of musicals or things like that when I was, vinyl of those kind of musicals when I was young. But mostly, no, they listened to, I remember them listening to Mozart, which I never liked, and some Scottish folk music, which I didn't take much to that either. And the other stuff, I think I picked it up later on, so it became something, the standards and whatever the great, like mostly American songwriting things from a few decades. That stuff I think was completely new to me. It was like opening a box and going, "Ooh, look at this! I didn't know this was here."
Yeah. But then the Philly sound stuff, I mean, the Gamble and Huff stuff that you are interested in at the moment, when you knew it first, and you must have known it first, it was certainly on the background, it must have been on the clubs, pre-Talking Heads, maybe early 70s. Did you dismiss it? Did you have no real interest in it? And are you now just coming back to it in an almost archivist kind of historical kind of way to say, oh, this is good stuff?
The Philly soul stuff was stuff that I first heard when I was going to clubs, dance clubs in the 70s, like at whatever, Paradise Garage or any of those kind of places, or the various clubs in New York or in other places. That would be the stuff they played. That was the dance music at the time, and along with a lot of other things. And later on, I went, you go back and listen to it and you go, wow, the songwriting is just incredible, and the arrangements are great, and the words they have something, most of them have something to say. And I thought, wow, this is really, there was a high level of whatever craft and all this stuff that was coming out of Philadelphia at that time. Of course, at the time, you just think it's this factory, it's just pop music on the radio. But then later you realize, wow, what an extraordinary period and what an extraordinary run they had.
Like, was New York responsible in many ways?
I think the band could have come into existence somewhere else. In another form, we came into existence in Rhode Island, in a small town called Providence, and then we kind of refined it again in New York. But I think it's not, one can't underestimate the power of the am I saying this right? Of the club owner who opens their doors and allows acts who are doing something a little bit different or playing original material on the stage. Before that, it was just not possible. You either had to be a cover band or an established recording artist, etc., etc. And if you were just somebody doing original material, unless you were like a folk act, you had nowhere to be. There was no club that would have you. And a couple of clubs, CBGBs and a couple of others, opened their doors and said, yeah, okay, we don't care if business is so bad. If we get 20 people in here to see you guys, then we're happy.
That's maybe 15 more than we might have got, yeah.
Yes. But gradually word got out and it became a thing.
Well, the word that got out, like 8,000 miles away in this part of the Atlantic, was that there was an amazing scene happening in New York around the Mud Club and around the Bowery and around CBGBs, etc. And there was the Ramones here and Talking Heads there and Blondie here and television there, as though you were one fantastic community all working together to save music from the clutches of Rod Stewart and Elton John and whatever. It wasn't really like that, was it?
Yeah, well, we did all live pretty close to one another.
Yeah, I'm not saying there was animosity, but there wasn't really that much togetherness with you guys.
Yeah, we would hang out at the bar, and it was all amiable, but it wasn't. I was very envious of the British punk scene when that emerged, because everyone looked like they were more together, more united politically and fashion. The look was more similar. The designs of the record covers, everything seemed to be more in a united front. Whereas in New York, everyone seemed to be, it was hard to pin down what do these bands have in common. And I think they did have in common the fact that they didn't like whatever the dinosaurs of rock that were roaming the earth, and they wanted to make music that, for them and their friends, that felt real, that felt immediate, and it felt like it was kind of either from the heart, or it made you laugh, or it was something that felt a little bit more real.
cool to be part of all this thing that was happening, this movement, that whether it was real or not, or close or not. I'm not saying anyway at all that it wasn't close, but I mean, like, it wasn't a major movement thing. It was just cool to be part of all that, wasn't it?
In retrospect, it was. At the time, of course, we all complained bitterly that, hey, we're not a punk band, or hey, we're not like them, or we're not like them, or we don't really like them, or whatever. But at the same time, the being all lumped together had its benefits for a short while.
Yeah, and like the kind of stuff that you did though, like I mean, like the Ramones had the look. You came out with something completely different. It was like it was hip to be square kind of look.
Yeah, I thought that if we would go for this kind of anti rock and roll cliche look, or we would go for the man on the street everyday dress look, and try and have no look. But then trying to have no look is a look in itself.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to have no look. You're always, as soon as you step on stage, you're saying something.
Of course, but I mean, by the same token, it was like a geek rock kind of thing that, like, you know, there's nobody else doing that, and I can call it that. And by the way, that's praise completely for me, just in case you're wondering. I mean, I love the Ramones as well. Don't get me wrong.
Yes, yeah. As did we. We liked the Ramones as well, and we toured with them. And there was a short while, I guess, where what we were all doing was so new and unheard,
yeah,
that people would go out and see both bands on a double bill, even though musically we were miles and miles apart, and people liked both of us. I don't know if it was equally, but they enjoyed it was a variety show,
yeah,
and the audience didn't mind that.
In retrospect, looking back though at some of those things, if you think the first album, Talking Heads 77, the second one, More Songs About Buildings and Food, the third one, Fear of Music, by the time of sort of Stop Making Sense and Little Creatures, where really, like, commercially it was like very big, probably the biggest, even though those other albums were probably as praised or more praised than any albums of the time. Do you think in some ways that there was a pressure on you to be more innovative than just the journey you've been on all throughout the 90s, for instance, and that was the pressure you could do without? I mean, in retrospect now, you might have known it at the time, but you had to kind of top the last one for cleverness.
I was aware of a little bit of that. I was aware that when I thought to myself, oh, let's make a pop record, because that's something we haven't done yet, and to me that was novel. But of course, I was thinking of Little Creatures.
Little Creatures, yeah.
And of course, for some of the fans and critics, they thought that was just, we were pandering to the public, or pandering to, and that was a little too commercial. But for me, it was a little bit of a innovation, because I'd never tried my hand at that before.
Yeah.
And I always knew that I could go back to doing things that were maybe a little bit more unusual, but for me, doing a sort of a pop record was unusual. It did happen to be maybe our biggest selling one, so it wasn't that big of a mistake. But I knew that it wasn't going to be a linear thing. That would just be
Sure.
jump back to doing something else right after that.
Right, but I mean, like, you never felt any pressure from outside at all, from people who might have expected something of Talking Heads. Like, for instance, even now, people think, oh, David Byrne, Talking Heads, yeah, well, once an art rocker, always an art rocker. Is there an element of that sometimes? But there is, to hell with it. But was it more sort of pronounced in those days? And that's why the Little Creatures pop album might have been something that you thought might have annoyed some people or something.
I was only aware of that kind of pressure, or that attitude, kind of from downtown New Yorkers who are a bit snobbish. And and they still are, once some act gains a certain popularity, they abandon them.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, if everybody likes them, they can't be any good anymore.
Okay, well then, Lazy being top of the charts at Express 2, I mean, are you glad that is something that doesn't happen every day? To be up there with all the other dance acts and the boy bands and all the rest, playing Top of the Pops, which you never did in Britain, with Talking Heads once, regardless of requests.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is amazing, actually. So, like, is it good? I mean, like, would you like a little bit more Lazy success?
It wouldn't be bad, but, you know, I can't. It's nice, but I can't push for it.
Yeah.
I find that if I try and write stuff with that and with success in mind, then it's going to fail.
Well, you used to talk about people in your songs like a middle class kind of clean living sort of whatever type person. Like Big Country is one song I think of particularly, of just, you know, and then the final line, like, I wouldn't live there if you paid me, whatever. Now I know you're not being as cynical as, or you weren't necessarily, there's a certain irony or whatever, but do you ever think you could possibly be in danger of growing into the kind of person that you used to write about?
Oh, of course. Yeah, there's always that fear lurking.
So it is a fear, is it?
Yeah, there's always this fear lurking that one day you'll wake up and look in the mirror and you go, I'm the person I've turned into that person I wrote about. I don't think